Nice.
You are 5 months old, and I will smite you out of existence before you reach the age of 2.
Welcome back, everyone. Here we are yet again with another installment of my For Honor how-to series, and since you clicked on the video, it's no surprise what we are looking at today. In my last video, I asked you to let me know what hero you'd like to see me do next, and I would like to thank you all so very much for responding to that. I got a smattering of answers, which was great, but someone brought up the point of Afeera, and by making a video on her, I could close out the current Outlanders faction. Additionally, and more importantly, she is For Honor's newest addition, and in the grand scheme of things hasn't been out that long. This means a lot of players are still learning how to use her effectively, as well as defend against her oppressive playstyle. At the moment, she allows the greatest room for players to learn, and that is why we will be analyzing her today. I'm going to go ahead and admit that the order and flow of my dialogue might seem out of place and a little choppy, but that's because there's really no good starting point when talking about Afeera. All of her moves flow with and build off each other, so I'm just going to start out by explaining the moves themselves, then tie them together in the end. So please, bear with me on the janky description, but I promise I'll make it all link together. Another disclaimer here, just like in all my how-to videos, these are my own subjective analyses. I'm certain some will disagree with me or want to point out something else they believe is important. All of that is great, and I encourage a healthy dialogue amongst players. I also recommend that you go watch other people's videos about heroes to get an even broader perspective on the character and learn something new that you didn't learn over here. Now with all the introductions out of the way, let's begin. Afeera was released as our first hero from the land of Arabia, and I know many players, myself included, were very excited at this news. Many have been asking for a Persian or Middle Eastern faction for years, so finally seeing a hero from this region of the world was long awaited. Of course, Afeera isn't a whole faction, but having at least one hero from the Middle East is better than nothing, and still very fulfilling. In a similar theme mentioned in my previous videos, Afeera also has access to some pretty awesome customizations, and I've greatly enjoyed styling her out. As stated before, she has an oppressive playstyle, but she is very unique in the way she employs her offense. In my opinion, she has three main factors that make her offense feel special, those factors being her flips, heavies with varying properties, and her bashes. We will look at each of these topics, both how to use them and how to defend against them. We will also look at her feat selection and close out with my overall opinion on her. The first of Afeera's main distinctions are her flips. They sort of resemble discount shinobi and function similarly, but not nearly as effectively. You use the flips to dodge cancel out of recovery frames, as well as to continue your chain with a bash. You can also flip in any of the four directions, that being to the left, right, towards, or away from your opponent. Personally though, I rarely use the flips. For one, the iframes aren't great, so it's fairly easy to get hit out of your flips. Two, specifically on the backwards flip, it feels like you barely move away from your opponent, and are oftentimes still in reach of a quick light attack. Additionally, there's not really anything you can do to flow out of these flips, with the exception of a forward bash to guarantee a heavy attack. This usually makes the flips completely pointless to use in 1v1 situations, because when your opponent sees you flip out of recovery, the only thing you can do is a dodge forward bash at them, so they instinctively dodge to the side where you are vulnerable. Now, yes, you can throw a light or heavy after your flips, but they don't exactly flow like they are truly part of some kind of chain, and their success rates are highly inconsistent. The only real use I get out of these is in teamfights, or if I am personally outnumbered. Sometimes I can slip through my enemies and land an unsuspecting bash for some damage, but if other enemies are paying attention, they can quickly put a stop to my shenanigans. Overall, I think it's a cool idea and a design for a move. Just for right now, I don't think it's strong enough from a practical standpoint. Next up, I want to talk about her special heavies. Afeera doesn't have anything unique in terms of her regular attack chains, as she only has 2-hit chains of any combination of lights and heavies. Where things get interesting though are her chain heavy finishers. Depending on the direction Afeera throws the attack, the property of the heavy will be changed. A heavy from the right will be unblockable, from the top it will be undodgeable, and from the left it will displace an opponent if it is successful. This means that if she connects on that left chain heavy, it will physically move her opponent and potentially wall splat them if they are close enough to some object. The wall splat, of course, will guarantee another heavy and allow you to roll right into another mix-up without skipping a beat. Restating here, the right-sided chain heavy is unblockable, and nothing really unique or special about that, but the top heavy is undodgeable. This pairs very nicely with her unbalancing left heavy for reasons I will explain after discussing her last topic, bashes. Afeera has 8 different ways to bash her opponent. Yes, you heard me correctly, 8. It's a lot. One of them comes mid-chain after her flips, but I already mentioned that one earlier. Another bash also comes mid-chain, but after regular attacks, that being an opener, light, or heavy. Her third option is a simple bash from neutral, and her fourth option is basically just her third one, except when you initiate the bash from far enough away, Afeera morphs into Usain Bolt and rushes towards the enemy before smacking them with her shield. This bash is also great for chasing down weak opponents who are silly enough to think they can escape your seemingly infinite reach. Afeera also has a deflect, with which the counter is the shield bash. The last three can all be lumped together as she can initiate her chain bash after dodge attacks, zone attack, and even her sprinting attack. All of her bashes lead to guaranteed chain heavies. What's more, these heavies are chained finishers, and retain the same directional properties I mentioned earlier. This is where your bash mix-ups and the undodgeable heavy come into play. After striking your opponent with an opener attack, you can choose to smack them with a heavy, but if you are aware of your surroundings, you can specifically use your left displacement heavy to wall splat your opponent and guarantee another heavy attack and continue chain pressure. Of course, your opponent can always dodge these bashes, so if you think your opponent is going to try and dodge or bash, you can throw that undodgeable top heavy to catch them. With so many ways to initiate a bash, and having an undodgeable or unblockable mix-up, Afeera has an incredibly strong offense and a difficult mix-up to break out of. Even with just part of her moveset, you can pull off some pretty fancy moves and style on your opponents like this. But as I mentioned before, I said I would explain how best to counter her, so I'm going to talk about that next. Again, just to reiterate, these are subjective methods based on my own observations and experience fighting the character. There is no one right way to go about defending against an Afeera. These are just what usually work best for me. When it comes to starting her mix-up, some Afeeras will begin with her neutral bash. Sometimes they feign it, but usually they stick to it, so dodging it is usually a safe option. The only other way I ever see an Afeera start their chain is with a light or zone attack. For those of you who can react to lights, take the bet and go for the light parry. I don't know what it is about Afeera players, but 90% of the time they start with a light attack, so parrying or going for the light deflect is almost always a risk in your favor. I've completely shut down certain Afeera players simply by light parrying them, and it's sad because their kit has so much to offer, but they don't seem to know how to utilize it. For those of you that can't quite react to her light attacks, I offer two alternatives. 1. If you have a full guard, use it. Eventually the Afeera will catch on and revert to her neutral bash, and then you can get to dodging that instead. If your character doesn't have a full guard, dodge attacking at the right time is probably your best bet. I know that sounds like a bit of a cop-out, and with the recent changes to dodge attacks all being light parries, it makes sense why you'd be hesitant to try it. I just know from experience that Afeeras tend to be over-aggressive, so predicting when they will attack to dodge their openers has been rather effective. Defending against her bash mix-up is a bit trickier, as different players use her bashes differently. Some rely incredibly heavily on them, while I see others sprinkle them into their mix-ups. You really are going to have to pay attention to how your specific opponent uses their bashes, and adjust your defense accordingly. However, a common defensive method has found its way around. I can't tell you how many Afeera I've come across who use this specific pattern. They start with an opener attack, then bash into a left heavy for the wall splat. Next comes the guaranteed heavy, and instead of doing a bash the second time you're in their mix-up, they throw the undodgeable heavy. They are expecting you to dodge because you probably don't want to get hit by another bash so close to a wall, and since you already got hit by your first bash, you don't want to suffer the consequences again, so you instinctively dodge, right into her trap. I have learned to just take the first bash, if they choose to throw one, and then counter the undodgeable heavy the second time around. This has proven highly effective for me, and I hope it works for you guys too. Now, obviously, if you think she's going to bash you in her first mix-up, then by all means, dodge out of the way. My point here is that many Afeera use a bash first, then do an undodgeable heavy mix-up right after, instead of doing two bash mix-ups consecutively. Lastly, when defending against her flips, I usually throw a guard break since she is vulnerable during a dodge and it usually catches them off guard. Otherwise, if I notice they like to throw actual attacks after kick flips, I just wait to counter their attack. I know this is rather simple and seems obvious, but hey, it's what I do and it proves to be generally effective. Completely shifting gears here, let's talk about her feats. Again with the theme of the Outlanders, she has 4 feats unique to her. Her first tier feat is called Gravity's Pull and is essentially a neutral bash. What makes it unique is its speed, and if Afeera can finish the animation, it deals 20 damage. Her tier 2 is called Fortune's Favor, and it just means when you smack your opponent, you gain slight damage reduction for a short time. Her tier 3, called Speeding Comet, is an amped version of the tier 1 feat. It's essentially a bash activated from neutral, but this one gives her the full guard property on startup, and if she activates it while far away from an opponent, she will rush towards them with the full guard active. It does this cool animation which is both longer than the tier 1 but also deals more damage, 30 damage to be precise. The real kicker here though, see what I did there, is you can throw a chain heavy afterwards for even more damage. As a funny side note, you used to be able to use the tier 1 feat and immediately use the tier 3 plus the follow-up heavy all in one long chain, leaving your opponent so dazed and confused they probably start talking like my roommate.
And by that they mean he's literally sexually attracted to pans.
I don't...
With the new season's release, that was taken away. You can no longer get tier 3 right after landing tier 1, and I don't think anybody is complaining about that. But while we were on the topic of her tier 1 and 3 feats, I need to send out a PSA to everyone to please stop hitting Afeera out of her abilities. It's one thing if she goes for her feats during a chaotic team fight, but when it's just you two and some other opponent, please be mindful of your surroundings and let your Afeera teammate get her punish off. Your Afeera will be forever grateful.
Oh my goodness, Vortiger, please don't do that. I'm sure it was an accident, but that's unfortunate.
Her tier 4 is called Orbiting Shield and is a projectile feat. Afeera channels her inner Captain America and throws her shield at a specific target. Once that target is hit, the shield will ricochet to other enemies close by, dealing both 30 damage and a defense debuff to all enemies hit. It's pretty decent, but nothing too insane. Overall, I think Afeera is very strong and has multiple uses. Her bashes are good both for 1v1s as well as gank setups, and her high mobility makes for a really fun hero to play. I like the idea of chain heavies with different properties, and it certainly makes for a mix-up variety that keeps my opponents on their toes. She's certainly hard to fight against, but I think there are good ways to predict counter moves. I certainly recommend trying her out for yourself. As we end today's video, I'd like to ask again for what hero you think I should do next. I appreciated all the responses on the last video, and I do read all the comments, so if you mentioned a hero last time, I promise I took it into consideration. I also have 2 other orders of business. 1. Some people mentioned they would like to see me post some ranked duels content. If more of you would like to see that in a video or live stream, please let me know. If not, also let me know. I always appreciate feedback. Number 2. I know I'm a very tiny channel with an even smaller outreach, but I'd love to get to know some of you guys and just play and talk For Honor together. If you are interested, let me know your Discord down below and I'd be happy to join you, although I can't promise much availability with my busy schedule. With all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the content and maybe even learned a thing or two. Take care everyone, and we'll see you next time.